Chapter 5. Rebecca managed to finish her shower and beat Nick into the kitchen. Walking in the room, she found Steve sitting at the table where they'd all eaten the night before, drinking from what looked to be the same mug. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Steve said. "If I'd known you were in there, I wouldn't have burst in like that." "It's no problem, Steve," she smiled at him. "You were doing your job and protecting your con. I understand and respect that. If I'd known you were in the house, it probably wouldn't have happened." "And I would deeply regret that," drawled Nick, coming into the room behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist and bent to nuzzle her neck. "You smell good," he whispered, nuzzling her ear. "Food," she stated simply, pulling out of his arms. "No distractions until I get food." Rebecca went to the refrigerator and opened the double doors. Peering inside, she tried to find something she could turn into a decent breakfast. She started pulling things out and stacking them on the island behind her. After all that had happened, even in such a short amount of time, she figured she might as well make herself at home. Besides, cooking relaxed her, and she hadn't been able to do any in so long. Rebecca set about fixing breakfast, opening cabinets, and mentally inventorying what was available for other meals as she went along, looking for what she needed. She listened to Nick and Steve talk at the table while she worked. "Did you even get her real name before you fucked her?" Steve asked quietly as Nick took a seat at the table with him. Nick was fully aware the other man knew Rebecca could hear them, but he asked anyway. "Her name's Rebecca. She told me that and more before we went to bed the first time." "Separate beds." He glared at the other man. "All I can say is you certainly work fast." A smirk settled on his face. Nick's scowl deepened and he all but growled. "I suggest you show a little more respect to the woman who may very well end up as your Karen, or you may find yourself looking for a new Chanat." Steve's eyebrows shot up in astonishment. He looked his con in the eye. "You're shitting me?" Nick remained silent, the unhappy look never leaving his face. "All right, you're not. I'll behave myself, I promise." "You better." Nick took a deep breath and let it out slowly. He turned and watched Rebecca move around the room. "I need you to line up some backup. We may not need it right away, but they'll track her down eventually. I want our people ready when it happens. Why wait for them to find us? Give us the advantage and make the confrontation on our terms. Call them and tell them we have her and we're keeping her." Steve's gaze flicked back and forth from Nick to where Rebecca was cooking in the large sweatshirt and shorts that could barely be seen beneath it. "If you seal the mating with her before you contact them, even the council wouldn't try to make her go back. Whether or not we seal the mating is going to be her choice." Nick's tone brooked no argument. "If I tried to force her, or even suggest it was a stipulation for protection, I would be no better than the animals she's running from." Rebecca continued her cooking, pretending she couldn't hear every word that was said. Can you believe she didn't know how a mating is sealed? Apparently they've completely abandoned mating, and don't even teach how it's done in her old Chanat. Steve blinked in disbelief. "And you found this out how?" "Well, without going into details. I had to explain sealed matings, both the how and the effects, to her last night, after she bit me." "Shit, did she?" "No, but I think it was close." Before Steve had a chance to respond, Rebecca set plates down in front of him and Nick. She walked away only long enough to fetch her own plate, before she sat at the table with them, and they all ate breakfast together. Rebecca asked questions about what was going on in the outside world, what she'd missed in the last 6 months, while the men tried to answer them. After they'd eaten, Nick suggested they go for a short run before making a trip into town. "If you don't mind, I'd rather not." Rebecca stood up, picking up the empty plates on the table. "Rather not what, kitten?" Nick took the plates from her hands and carried them to the sink. Honestly? Either. Will you tell me why? Well, except for the last about 20 hours, I've spent the last 6 months or so as a cat all day, every day. I'd rather not return to it quite so quickly if I can help it. She shrugged. But don't let that stop you. If you want to go, go ahead. I'll be fine here. He walked back and stood in front of her. He rubbed his hands up and down her upper arms, trying to comfort her. Why don't you want to go into town? As much as I like seeing you in my clothes, I thought you'd want to find something that fit. I'd like some clothes of my own, she admitted, ducking her head briefly before looking at him again. But I'm reluctant to be seen by anyone. I never know who might contact my father and tell him where I am. The only kitsune that live in or around Springerville are my Chanat. While I can't guarantee that no one would contact your family, I can promise to keep you safe, he said sincerely. I won't let them take you back. We're a small, tight-knit community here. If there were any unknown kitsune around, I'd know about it. Even if I hadn't encountered them yet, my Chanat would have let me know. She hesitated another few seconds before giving in. All right, if you're sure it's safe, I'll go into town with you. You go for your run, I'll clean up while I wait. You don't have to clean up after us. Why don't you go look in my office down the hall and see if there's anything you'd like to read, or there's a TV on the wall in the living room if you'd rather watch something. He suggested. I'll find something to do when I'm done, but I don't mind cleaning up. Besides, I made most of the mess anyway, Rebecca insisted. If you're sure, Nick acquiesced. He turned to Steve. Come out with me, we'll run for a little bit, then we'll all go into town. Once they were outside and had the door closed so Rebecca couldn't easily hear them, Nick continued, I want you to stick close to the house. Make sure no one comes too close while she's in there alone. Stay out of sight though, I don't want her thinking we don't trust her. Yes, sir. They both stripped, folding their clothes onto a chair on the porch before shifting and heading out into the forest.